Some of the greatest harm ever done to Indigenous communities was done by people who genuinely believed that they were doing God's work. I've been sitting on this for about a week because I wanted to make sure that I came across as articulate and educational and not emotional, because this is deeply emotional for me. Sarah Lucas and her husband moved to Wind River Reservation as missionaries to build a church. Their stated mission is to bring the gospel to the Northern Arapaho and Eastern Shoshone communities. If that's your calling, then I genuinely hope that you love the people you're serving. But loving them also means respecting them enough to understand their history, their culture, and what they actually believe. And that's where this gets messy. In her sermon a couple weeks ago after Sundance, she said that people were praying to pipes and praying to ancestors, and that a pipe can't hear your prayers. The problem is that Indigenous people don't believe that a pipe hears your prayers. That's not what the sacred pipe is. She's arguing against a belief that Indigenous people don't even have. A pipe is a sacred ceremonial object. Represents covenant, relationship, prayer, and responsibility. It is part of a ceremony, not an object to be worshipped. It's literally like walking into a church and pointing at a communion cup and saying that grape juice won't save you. Christians would look at you like you completely missed the point. The grape juice isn't the point. The grape juice represents something greater, criticizing something that you never took the time to understand. So when the Indigenous communities asked her for an apology, instead of showing Christian humility and reflection and respect, she doubled down. She said she would not apologize for preaching the Bible. They asked her to leave, and now she's claiming persecution. The thing is that she wasn't even preaching the Bible, because Philippians 2 calls Christians to do nothing from selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility value others above yourself. Likewise, 1 Peter 3 urges believers to share their faith with gentleness and respect. Those passages don't change Christian doctrine, but they do speak to the posture that Christians are called to bring to every cross-cultural encounter. What makes this hit even harder is that this is not done in isolation, and this is nothing new. Indigenous peoples have heard this all before. For generations, missionaries have told our ancestors that they were evil. Their ceremonies were evil. Their songs were evil. Their language is evil. Their medicine is evil. The federal government literally partnered with churches to remove Indigenous children from homes forcibly, depriving them of their family, their community, and their culture, because they sincerely believed that Indigenous culture, ceremonies, and community stood in the way of civilization. Ceremonies were suppressed. Languages were punished. Children were sent to boarding schools where they suffered immense abuse and experimentation. Entire generations grew up believing that being native somehow made them less worthy in the eyes of God, because that's what the church taught them. So people are rightfully angry that she won't apologize. And it's not because she was preaching Christianity. It's because Indigenous people have heard this over hundreds of years. Outsiders telling you what you believe without actually asking you. Because the Arapaho and the Shoshone welcomed Sarah and her family into their community and onto their land with humility and hospitality, and she repaid them with hostility. As a history teacher, one of the first things that we teach our students is that if you're going to explain another group to someone, you should probably ask them what they believe before telling them what they believe. It's basic historical method, it's basic scholarship, and it's also Anthropology 101. Before you analyze another culture, you learn it. Before you critique another religion, you understand it well enough. The people who practice it would recognize themselves in your explanation. Interestingly, this isn't just anthropology or history, it's also biblical. James 1:19 instructs believers to be quick to listen and slow to speak. It serves as a reminder that listening is not weakness, it is a prerequisite for understanding. Christian missionaries have wrestled with these same questions for decades. There's a book called Peace Child, and it became one of the most influential missionary blueprint handbooks of the 20th century. I had to read it when I was in college, and it's because the author, Don Richardson, argues that if you are going to bring Christianity into another culture, you don't begin by assuming everything outside of your culture is evil. You listen. You learn the language. You understand the stories. You find the concepts that are already present that allow people to understand the gospel through their cultural lens. This approach echoes Paul in Acts 17. Before speaking in Athens, Paul demonstrated that he had taken the time to listen and understand the people that he was addressing, even quoting their own poets and acknowledging their religious culture before presenting the gospel. And there's another book I remember from college called The White Man's Gospel. Yes, I went to a religious institution before I transferred. White Man's Gospel asks an even harder question. At what point do we stop preaching Christ and start confusing Christianity with our own culture? Throughout much of history, Indigenous people were not simply presented with Christianity. They were presented with Christianity wrapped in European ideals, European ideas about civilization, about language, about education, about family, until the two became almost impossible to separate. In biblical perspective, Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 9 that he became all things to all people so that he might reach them. For many, this passage has become the foundation of contextualization. The idea that the gospel can be faithfully communicated without requiring people to abandon their culture. History reminds us that faith and humility were never meant to compete with each other. The question is not whether people should share their beliefs, it's whether they're willing to listen as deeply as they speak. And if understanding comes after condemnation instead of before it, then history suggests that we have learned very little from the generations that have come before us.